So recently I did a road trip from Houston all the way to San Jose to deliver a custom height adjustable desk and trash can lids. Today's episode of Woodworker Diaries is gonna be all about that trip. So if you like road trips and a redemption arc, as Thinkle's Woodshop called it, then strap in and come along for the ride. The first version of this desk was completed back in November. When it arrived, well, just take a look at these pictures. There were scuffs everywhere, and one of the legs that was connected to the desktop completely broke off. It was a really angry break too. Look at the splinters on that thing. I cried for a day, but then after that, I vowed not only to remake the desk from scratch, but to deliver it myself. Why, you ask? Because I wanted to make sure it got there perfectly, and I needed a vacation. This was something I'd wanted to try out too. Not only making an item for someone, but delivering it myself. So, road trip it was. On the very first day, we left Houston around 8 a.m. and it took us a little more than 12 hours to get to El Paso. This stretch was a very interesting showcase of how drastically landscape can change. It went from highways and roads to totally flat and empty to an interesting variety of desert mountains and shrubbery. Cacti would be in bunches and groups on the side of the road like bushes. The mountains took on many shapes. Some were normal rocky mountains, some outright pyramids, and there was even a stretch of the drive where all the mountains looked extremely flat, as if the top has been cut clean with a sword. The further west we got, the more I found myself thinking, yeah, this is what I imagined the Wild Wild West to look like. On day 2, we decided to change things up and go for a really quick morning hike before hitting the road again. The road to the state park was really breathtaking. The mountains seemed like they were sitting out in a distance, and the road made you feel like you were driving straight into them, almost like a slow 360 dolly zoom. The trail we hiked was called the Aztec Caves Trail. It was a little over a mile, but the incline was very steady, with the last part steep enough to where you had to use your hands to move. The birds here seemed to be perfectly camouflaged with the bushes. You could hear them chirping everywhere, but you had to really concentrate to start to see them. Cacti were everywhere in all kinds of shapes that I'd never seen before. And looking at all the low, prickly shrubs and plants made me think, I can totally see how cowboy boots would be useful here. When we got to the cave, there was a very cool echo effect. The temperature also changed dramatically, so inside the cave was actually quite cold. The view here was really wide and open. We could see our car way out in the distance. Red soil was everywhere, sand, cacti, bushes, and just everything you saw in bits and pieces along the way was now being looked at all at once. After the hike, we made our way back down and got on the road again. And this time, our destination was Phoenix, Arizona. This portion of the drive took everything I thought about deserts and mountains and then threw them out the window. To get to Phoenix, we had to drive through the bottom portion of New Mexico. This section of New Mexico was the emptiest and widest bit of nothing I've ever encountered so far. The mountains here were way bigger than what we'd seen in Texas. Not only that, they were so big and so far out in the distance that it felt like each mountain we saw would take about an hour drive to finally pass it. There were signs posted that warned you about dust storms and what to do when they happen. Pull over to the side of the road, stop driving, and just wait it out. There were even a warning system with lights every now and then that said they would turn on if a dust storm was happening. And then, when we finally got into Arizona, the landscape became more of a scenic desert. The mountains suddenly had more interesting shapes. Rocky, jagged, curve, you name it, they had it. At one point, there were really smooth boulders that walled off both sides of the road. I also realized the cacti here were very different. In Texas, the cacti were flat and bush-like. In New Mexico, you didn't really see them too much. Then, in Arizona, they started to reappear. First, you saw the flat ones similar to the ones in Texas. Then, you start to see the iconic cactus look start to appear everywhere. This was also the first time we'd seen this kind of cacti with our own eyes. They almost looked like people, standing up tall and getting ready to box. On the third day, we drove from Phoenix, Arizona to my sister and her husband's place in Los Angeles. And just when we thought we'd seen it all, making it into California territory felt like another very sudden change. From a beautiful and rocky desert landscape to a sudden line of tall palm trees. Out in the distance, a huge blue snow-capped mountain appeared. And the further into California and towards LA we went, the curvier the roads got. The more mountains and swooping green hills appeared, and of course, traffic. The moment we hit the infamous LA traffic, we of course passed by a car that was on fire. It wasn't a small fire either. The fire was roaring and at minimum 2 times taller than the car itself. Hopefully everyone was alright. But once we got to LA, we stayed there for a few days and just relaxed. So, quick intermission. Are you actually still here? If you are, then wow, I am amazed. This episode is much longer than previous ones we've made, and talking this much is still something kind of unnatural to me. I hope this is all entertaining to some degree, and if you really are still listening, do comment below to let me know that you are, so that I know that I'm doing at least an okay job at this. Now, back to the story. Relaxing in LA felt like a very much needed break from all the driving we did. We had barbecue, caught up on life, played tennis, and I had also planned to meet up with one of my cousins there. While we were having barbecue on the first night, we were all chatting at the dinner table, and all of a sudden my sister goes, 이준 언니 애기 낳았대. Her water had broken and she was in the hospital with a beautiful baby girl. That was a crazy surprise. And a really happy one at that. We didn't get to meet, but I assured her that I would be back to try and meet up again. After a short little break in LA, we made our way up to San Jose. This portion of the trip was filled with plenty of hills, lots of cows, and the densest fog I have ever experienced in my life. Literally, you could not see anything except the lights of the car in front of you. I think honestly, the camera was picking up more than we could actually see with our eyes. When we finally made it past the fog, we passed by some beautiful lakes and finally arrived in the city that seemed to sit in the middle of mountains. The next day, we delivered the desk, the trash can lids, and afterward hit the road immediately toward Joshua Tree National Park, the last big hurrah of our trip. I've heard so much about Joshua Tree National Park while I was still in school, and because of that, it's been on my list as a must-see place for the longest time. We stopped by in the morning and to my surprise, it was really cold. I'd really underestimated how cold it was gonna be, and you can probably see it written all over my face. The rock formations here were amazing, towering, all different kinds of shapes and sizes. And the Joshua Tree itself is a unique sight that's hard to miss and hard to forget. After Joshua Tree, we made a quick stop in San Antonio to visit our friend Jess, who was in town. And last but not least, made it back home to Houston. So what did I learn all from this? Number 1, I learned that I'm terrible at vlogging. If you're a part of my Patreon crew, you'll know that I had been experimenting with vlogging the traditional way by holding up the camera and talking to it. I realized that this is really unnatural to me. I found that I will have no idea what to say. Whenever I had a chance to choose to talk to the camera or not, I would simply choose not to do it. So back to this style it is. Number 2, I learned that I really do like to travel. My partner and I have always talked about doing more road trips, but ever since we started this business, I have been swamped with orders and found myself completely unable to take time off. We had been contemplating whether or not we wanted to add delivering items personally to our business model, and while there were a lot of hiccups on this trip, like getting a crack in our wheel and needing to replace all 4 tires, and even just spending way more than we'd anticipated, this whole trip kind of confirmed the idea that we really did like the process. We just sucked at it this time around. But it was a really good thing for us to have done this to get a taste of what it could be like and what we could improve for our next delivery. Number 3, last but not least, is that I really liked being able to deliver things personally, to get to actually meet my clients and see their reaction to the piece, to get to see the piece up in its new home, and the satisfaction of knowing that I gave a client and piece my absolute best. I found that that was a feeling worth fighting for. And I'm sure I'll be doing it again. If you've made it this far, wow. Thank you so much for watching and sticking with me. I first wanted to give a shout out to the newest member of my Patreon crew, Jerry. Thank you so much for joining. And if you too are interested in supporting my woodworking and I guess life journey, consider joining my Patreon group. It's still very much a young group and I am working hard to keep making improvements not only to my content across all platforms, but especially to my supporters. And since you have successfully made it to the end of this video, I've decided to include a very random special clip that we have found no other way to add onto any other video. Enjoy!